Now, what if I told you that there once lived a girl whose very existence became the darkest family secret of all time? She was not only a daughter to her parents, but in the most disturbing twist of fate, she grew up to become her mother's sister and her father's wife. Hello everyone, before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. This isn't a legend meant to frighten children. This isn't a horror movie script. This is reality, a reality so disturbing that it was buried in whispers, covered in shame, and passed down as a curse no one dared to speak about. Imagine being born into a world where love was twisted into control and family bonds became chains, a place where a mother's role was stolen by her own child and a father's role was turned into something monstrous. Now, what if I told you that there once lived a girl whose very existence became the darkest family secret of all time? She was not only a daughter to her parents, but in the most disturbing twist of fate, she grew up to become her mother's sister and her father's wife. To outsiders, she looked like any ordinary girl, but behind closed doors, her life was a nightmare, a life that turned family into prison, blood into curse, and innocence into tragedy. This is her story, and once you hear it, you will never forget. To understand how such a nightmare could ever take place, we need to step back in time. This was not the bustling modern world we live in today. It was a world of isolation. Small rural villages, far from the eyes of the law, hidden from society's judgment. In communities like these, family honor was everything. Outsiders were mistrusted, strangers rarely welcomed, and secrets could remain buried for decades. Poverty, illiteracy, and fear of scandal created the perfect environment for darkness to thrive. Families often lived in silence, bound together by unspoken rules that no one dared break. In one such family, behind the walls of a weathered wooden home, a girl was born. To the neighbors, she was simply another child of poor farmers, nothing unusual. But behind those walls, her fate was already sealed. Her father was a man obsessed, not with providing or protecting, but with control. To him, his family was not built on love, but ownership. The girl's mother had already endured years of misery, married off young, stripped of her freedom. But what she suffered in silence, her daughter would be forced to relive in an even darker way. Because in this household, the cycle of abuse did not end with one generation. It continued, twisting love into something unrecognizable. The stage was set. A father with unchecked power, a mother too broken to fight, and a daughter trapped in a world where innocence could not survive. This is the world she was born into. A world that would soon turn her from daughter into her mother's sister and her father's wife. Before the daughter's tragedy began, there was the mother. She too had once been a young girl with dreams of a simple life, dreams that never stood a chance. Married off when she was barely a teenager, her world quickly shrank to the four walls of a home she could not escape. Her husband, much older and consumed with control, never saw her as an equal partner. To him, she was property, someone to command, someone to silence. Over the years, she endured his cruelty in silence, her spirit slowly breaking under the weight of his dominance. In a village where gossip could ruin lives, speaking out was impossible. Women had no voice, no refuge, no way to fight back. So she carried her suffering quietly, hiding bruises on her body and deeper scars in her heart. And then came her daughter. For a brief moment, the child gave her hope. Hope that maybe innocence and laughter could survive in a house filled with shadows. She loved her daughter fiercely, more than she had ever loved herself. But as the child grew, she began to see something terrifying. Her husband's eyes lingering too long, his interest shifting from wife to daughter. It was a fear she tried to bury, a nightmare she wished would never come true. But deep inside, she knew. She was powerless to stop what was coming. Her silence, born of fear, would become the daughter's prison. The mother's suffering had laid the foundation for a cycle of darkness, and soon the daughter would be forced to step into her place, not just as a child, but as something far more horrifying. As the daughter entered her teenage years, the balance inside the household shifted. What began as small, almost unnoticeable changes soon grew into something undeniable. Her father, once seen as the protector, began treating her less like a child and more like someone meant to replace what her mother had once been. The neighbors never suspected anything unusual. To them, she was still a daughter, still a young girl helping in the fields and walking beside her mother in the village. But behind closed doors, her life was slowly being reshaped into something she could not understand or resist. Her mother watched in silence, trapped by fear and helplessness. She saw the looks, the favoritism, the subtle ways her daughter was being pulled away from her role as a child and forced into something far heavier. Every attempt to shield her failed, and with each passing day, the daughter's fate seemed more sealed. In this twisted transformation, titles lost their meaning. She was still a daughter, yes, but at the same time she was being placed in her mother's position, becoming like a sister to her own mother. And in her father's eyes, she was being recast as something unthinkable, a partner, a substitute, a wife in all but name. Her childhood was gone, her identity shattered. She was trapped in roles no one should ever hold, living with the unbearable weight of being both her mother's sister and her father's wife. The daughter's tragedy deepened when new lives began to enter the world, children born into a family already poisoned by silence and shame. At first, the neighbors celebrated as they always did when a baby arrived, but soon whispers began to spread. Something was not right. Some of the children were frail from birth, struggling to survive even their first days. Others carried visible deformities, eyes clouded, limbs twisted, bodies too weak to endure the harshness of life in a poor, rural village. Each time the family tried to hide the truth, curtains stayed drawn, excuses were made, and the cries of sick infants were muffled behind closed doors. The mother, already broken, could do little but weep. The daughter, still barely more than a child herself, was forced into the impossible role of both mother and sister to the children she bore. Her arms carried them, but her heart carried the unbearable weight of knowing they were born from a fate she had never chosen. Outside, the community began to murmur. People wondered why this household seemed cursed, why tragedy followed them again and again, but no one dared to question too closely. In those days, secrets were kept, and shame was buried deeper than truth. For the daughter, every birth was a reminder of the nightmare she could not escape. The children were innocent, yet they became living symbols of the family's darkest secret, a secret too horrifying to ever speak aloud. And as more lives slipped away, the line between family curse and tragedy blurred beyond recognition. Over time, the weight of secrets, shame, and suffering began to crush the family from within. What once appeared to be a normal household to the outside world had, behind its doors, turned into a place of grief and silence. The children, fragile and often sick, did not live long. Some passed away in infancy, their cries fading too soon. Others survived but bore the marks of their origin, becoming constant reminders of the curse that hung over the family. With each death, the mother sank deeper into despair. She had lost her place in her husband's life, and now she was losing the little ones who might have given her some comfort. The daughter carried an even heavier burden. Still a child herself, she was forced to bury siblings who were also, in a twisted way, her own children. She carried guilt, fear, and exhaustion far beyond her years. Her laughter disappeared, replaced by a hollow silence that filled the rooms where joy should have been. The father, once proud and controlling, found his household slipping further into ruin. Neighbors whispered of a curse, of punishment for sins no one dared to name aloud. Isolation deepened, and the family became shadows on the edge of the village, avoided by others, left to rot in their misery. The house that had once stood as a symbol of control and dominance was now nothing more than a prison, decaying from within. Relationships were destroyed, bonds twisted beyond recognition, and love turned entirely into fear. By the end, the family was not remembered for their land, their work, or their name, but only for the darkness that consumed them. Years passed, but the shadows of that house never truly faded. The family's name became tangled with whispers, their story told only in hushed tones around firesides and hidden within old village records. No one spoke of it openly, but everyone knew something terrible had happened within those walls. The daughter, once a symbol of innocence, became the center of a tale that outlived her. Some said she went mad from grief. Others claimed she remained silent until her last breath, carrying secrets no one else dared to reveal. The truth, like the family itself, was buried in the silence of time. But stories such as these never disappear completely. They transform into warnings, into legends told to remind future generations of what happens when control, fear, and obsession replace love and humanity. In the end, the daughter was remembered not for who she truly was, but for the roles forced upon her: daughter, sister, wife, mother. Titles that should never have belonged to one person, bound together in the darkest way imaginable. Her legacy was not one of honor or pride. It was a curse, etched into the memory of a community that could never forget, even when it refused to speak aloud. And so her story survives, a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are not found in haunted houses or ghostly legends, but in the families we trust most. And so, this was the story of the daughter who became her mother's sister and her father's wife. A tale so disturbing, so unnatural, that it forces us to question the very meaning of family. Her life was not her own. Her choices were stolen before she even understood what choice meant. And yet, her story lives on, not because she wanted it told, but because the silence around her was too heavy to erase. It is a reminder that the darkest secrets are often not buried in distant castles or whispered in ghost stories, but hidden in the quietest of homes, behind closed doors, among people who appear ordinary to the outside world. So the question remains, how many more stories like hers have been buried by shame, forgotten by history, or silenced by fear? Thank you for watching. If you found this story chilling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are not strangers at all.